One morning in her office in St. James's Palace, Sandy Henny had a telephone call from the gardener at Highgrove. She was in the thick of organizing an overseas tour, with 101 other things kicking off. "Yes, David. I've got a problem. Christ, I need another one." "What is it?" He said, "The moorhen's dead." I thought, do I give a stuff about the moorhen? I said, "Right, well David, what do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to tell the boss." I said, "You're down at Highgrove, where the boss was. You go and tell him." He said, "But the Prince of Wales is very fond of this bird." So I said, "You want me, who's in London, to ring the boss to tell him the moorhen's dead because you won't do it?" "Yes, that's what I want." "Well, what's so special about this moorhen?" "It's because it's been shot," and I thought Owen laughed. Now I know why he wants me to tell him, so I said, "Okay, but before I do I want you to tell me the full story." "Well, it's been shot." "Yes, but by whom?" "I don't know." "Come on David, there's a reason here." "He was just like a policeman." He said, "The boys were seen walking in the vicinity of the pond." "Right, so you're telling me one of the boys has shot the bird?" "Well, I didn't see it." "No, but that's what your understanding is," and he said, "Yeah." So I rang the boss. "Bernie, can you put me through to the boss please?" "Yes, what's it about?" "Don't ask, Bernie." "Your Royal Highness." "Good afternoon, Sandy. I'm so sorry to trouble you, sir, but I've got some sad news." "Oh, what's that?" "The moorhen's dead," and he said, "Oh my God, I loved that bird." I said, "That's just what David said. One of the things he used to do to relax when he came home from a day out was to go out and feed the chickens and walk down by that wonderful pool, and it relaxed him." Then he said, "Those bloody boys." I hadn't said a word. I said, "I can't let you say that because I don't know that." And he said, "Where were they?" I said, "Well, they were seen in the vicinity of the pond." "Right," he said, "that's it. I want you to talk to them. I want you to find out which one of them did it. I want to know what happened, and I want an apology." So I thought, right, they're at school, my friend Andrew Gailey. "Hello Sandy," he said. "Got a good one for you this time. It's not funny, the bird's dead, but by this time I'm starting to giggle. Would you mind getting the boys into your office, please, because the prince is really hacked off about this. Could you tell the boys Granny, their nickname for Sandy, will give them 24 hours for one of them to cough to the boss. 24 hours and that's it." Some hours later, I'm driving home and Andrew rings and he's giggling before he starts. He says, "I got them into the office," and I said, "William. Harry. I've had Sandy on the phone and your father's very upset because someone has shot the moorhen." They're looking at each other and saying, "Shot the moorhen? Shot the moorhen?" Then William turns to Andrew and says, "Which moorhen is that, Dr. Gailey?" And Harry says, "The one you told me not to shoot." I said, "Tell Harry he's got 24 hours, and bless his heart he rang his dad and said, 'I'm so sorry Papa, it was me, I shouldn't have done it.'" Those boys are so close to each other. The loyalty between them and the mischievousness and sense of honesty, not wishing to tell a lie. Andrew and I were wetting ourselves laughing. The prince was delighted that Harry had coughed. It's interesting, however, that their father didn't simply pick up the phone to his two sons and say, "What's the story?" William and Harry were ever partners in crime. In Cloisters one year, a year when their equally mischievous cousin Zara Phillips was with them, Sandy was sitting in the bar of the hotel, warming up after a freezing day but a very successful photo call. She had kicked her shoes off when she suddenly became aware of frantic waving at the window of the hotel, and there, standing outside in the snow, were Tiggy and Harry. I thought, "Oh my God, what's happened?" So I ran out. I was just wearing a jumper and it was freezing bloody cold outside, and I got outside the door and that little sod Wales, I mean the big one, was pelting me with snowballs. There's me thinking, "Oh my God, something's happened to him. He's fallen over and broken his neck or something." Tiggy and Harry, and one of the policemen, who was also in on this joke, were roaring with laughter, and I'm chasing William up the road, saying, "Person of doubtful parentage, "You wait till I get hold of you." And he ran around this car and he's throwing snowballs like nobody's business because he was prepared to include me in some of the fun. That was the nature of the kid. He loved mucking about and having fun. On another occasion, they were up at Burkhall, where the Queen Mother had a collection of 11 grandfather clocks in the dining room, which are still there today, along with the tartan walls and carpets. Sandy was having supper with them and at 10 o'clock practically jumped out of her skin when all the clocks suddenly started chiming. All three princes could barely contain their mirth. After supper, they asked her to stay and play a game of cards the boys had made up. The idea was you were kneeling on the floor and had to get these cards down as quickly as you could, and of course they thought it was just hysterical, and William was pushing me out of the way and I went flying at one stage. Everyone roaring with laughter, trying to get back into the game to put my cards down. Is William competitive? Not half. But fun and willing to include people in his life. I know he was young and should have been full of life, but there was something else about him that meant you couldn't help but smile when he came into a room because he was always full of fun. It was not like when the prince walked in and you thought, "Oh God, where's it coming from today? Good mood, bad mood or whatever." William or Harry used to walk in, "Oh hello, how are you?" In the summer of 2000, that easy relationship between Sandy and the boys came to a sad end. William's 18th birthday, a major milestone, was looming and Sandy was looking at the perennial problem of how to organize a photo call that he would happily agree to. She came up with a formula that worked brilliantly. It produced some of the best photographs of William ever taken, gave the media a collective snapshot of his life at Eton, which he was on the verge of leaving, and was effectively a big thank you to the media for having allowed him to spend his 5 years at the school in peace. Rather than ask William to perform in front of dozens of cameras, which she knew would be counterproductive, she arranged for only two: photographer Ian Jones from the Daily Telegraph, who had taken William's confirmation photographs, and television cameraman Eugene Campbell from ITN. She thought William would relax with them, as they were both young, sympathetic and good ambassadors for their profession. She guessed rightly that they would take some excellent shots, over which William would have the right of veto, which would then be pooled. This is an arrangement the palace and the media frequently practice. If space or circumstances don't allow for more than a few members of the press to be with the royal family during a visit or an event, the few that can be accommodated distribute their photographs or reports free of charge to every other newspaper and television channel. Ian and Eugene worked over a 5-month period, dipping in and out of William's Eton life, building up a good rapport with him, which resulted in an intimate and hugely insightful view of the second in line to the throne as he turned 18. It was almost seen as a two-way learning street, recalls Ian Jones. We were there to learn about his school life, but the palace also saw it as a way for William to learn about the media and how press photographers and TV cameras work and how you put a piece of film together. He got very interested in the composition and the artistic side of it, also the technology and how shots would be edited together. It was an education for him in an area of the media that would be a very important part of his future life. It all went off very, very well and achieved exactly what it set out to do. It was lovely. He was very engaging. Once he saw how it worked and what we were looking for, at our next meeting he'd say, "I've had thoughts about this," or "What do you think about that?" He'd been putting his mind to it and planning ideas for the project. The very first time he was a little bit cautious, but when he realized there was a reason to it and what we were doing was worthwhile, he was thoroughly involved and really up for it. The cookery was his idea and one of the best bits. He was making a rice dish with chicken stock and it was very good fun. To level out the playing field, the deal was that there would be no exclusives, no preferential treatment, and the photographs would be embargoed so that they all appeared on the same day. The dailies would have 10 of them on the Friday for their Saturday editions and the Sundays would have an extra 4 a day later. Sandy discussed this entire deal at every stage with Stephen Lamport, the Prince's private secretary, with Mark Bolland, his deputy, and with Les Hinton and Guy Black at the PCC. Everyone gave it their blessing. Ian was a freelance under contract to the Daily Telegraph. His editor was Charles Moore, and when he saw the Prince, which had been electronically stored on the office system. He liked them so much he wanted to maximize the impact by running them in the glossy Saturday magazine, which goes to print earlier than the main body of the paper. He therefore wanted them before the agreed date. Sandy Henny cleared this with Lamport and Bolland, and the photographs were released. Shortly afterwards this was leaked to the Daily Mail and the Times, and Lamport agreed to let them have a set of photos early for their magazines too. Charles Moore was indignant and refused to let the photographs go. The Telegraph had provided the photographer and the technology. It was not unreasonable, he felt, for the Telegraph to have this slight advantage over its competitors. At this point Piers Morgan, editor of the Daily Mirror, got wind of the story. He turned on Sandy, and with scores to settle, wound up the rest of Fleet Street, and it all turned very ugly. Sandy had made one crucial mistake. She had relied on a gentleman's agreement. She had nothing in writing. That evening Ian arrived home from work and switched on the evening news to discover he was the lead story. Jenny Bond, the BBC's royal reporter, was standing in front of St James's Palace talking about the row, saying, "The photographer stands to make millions of pounds out of these pictures. As a freelance, he did hold the copyright, but says, that would never have been the case. I was giving them free of charge to every media outlet in the world. Over time I suppose I might have made a couple of hundred, but considering the hours and hours and hours of work I did on that, all in my own time, it was such an honor, such a privilege, and I really thought I was doing something special, not just for William but for the media, which is a profession I love." The issue of copyright took center stage. It was made to sound as if I had conned them out of the copyright, but every freelance owns his copyright. ITN kept the copyright of the film. Mario Testino keeps the copyright of the pictures he takes. Everyone who does portraits for the royal family keeps the copyright. I was asked to surrender it, and I thought the only honorable course of action was to say, "It's yours." The final outcome was not catastrophic. The photographs were released to every newspaper at the same time. They all honored the embargo, and the next day, the media were on to another story. As Andrew Neil, then editor of the Sunday Times, said, "It was a storm in a Fleet Street teacup." Except at St James's Palace. Sandy offered Stephen Lamport her resignation as a matter of formality, never for a moment believing it would be accepted. She had consulted them at every stage, she had everyone's agreement at every stage. Her mistake had been to trust men she thought were honorable. If it was a cock-up, it was a collective cock-up. But she was wrong. Her resignation was accepted, and by 3 o'clock that afternoon she had cleared her desk and was out on the street and out of a job. The Prince of Wales, for whom she'd tirelessly worked long and unreasonable hours, for 7 years, never even said goodbye, but Prince William immediately telephoned. "He tried to ring me 3 times, but I was so upset, I really was gutted, and I remember saying, I can't talk to him because I would be upset and I don't want to let myself down. Then he rang for the 3rd time and I thought, yeah, I can talk to him now. There was no, poor me, all this horrible publicity and it's ruined my exams. It was, how are you? I am so sorry." There was no thought for himself, it was all about how I was. Total loyalty. I didn't hear a word from the Prince of Wales, and there's William, not quite 18 and right in the middle of his A-levels, the total opposite. That spoke volumes to me about the sort of man he was going to be. Totally loyal to people. And that's why people won't let him down, they'd rather see something happen to themselves. They won't let him down because he will never let them down. Other things were said during that conversation, but my last words to him were, "Trust your own judgment, William, it's sound. There are people you will come across that your instincts will tell you not to trust. There are people you will come across, you will never like, but if they can do a service for you, then let them do it. But you know how far you can trust them." Because he got it. He thought it was his fault. Why he thought that, God alone knows. I don't know what had been said to him. I said, "It's got nothing to do with you. I accept I've done something silly, not dotting I's and crossing T's. I put my hands up to it, but it's nothing to do with you. You just carry on with your A-levels, it's fine." I didn't tell him what happened, it was a convoluted story and anyway it didn't matter. I was going and that was it. Out, gone, clear your desk, away, there's no looking back. Someone else was going to look after him now. The saddest thing was the boys, knowing I would never see them again. I know they're princes, but they were a huge part of my life. I loved them to bits. Ian Jones heard nothing from William, but the next time he saw him was in Closters for the traditional Easter photo call. When it was all over and he wired his shots back to London, Ian did some skiing and at lunchtime, when everyone was going back up the mountain, boarded a cable car, only to find the royal party had followed him in. He kept his head down, but William noticed him among the crowd and shuffled over in his skis to say hello. Ian, as William knows, is a lifelong supporter of Bolton Wanderers, and Aston Villa had just beaten Bolton in the semi-final playoff at Wembley. "We were robbed at Wembley," he said with a big grin on his face.